It's a Good Life by Jerome Bixby, Part 5. They ate dinner, the candles lighting their smiling faces, and ate it all right down to the last delicious drop of gravy. They complimented Mom and Aunt Amy on the roast beef, and the peas and carrots, and the tender corn on the cob. The corn hadn't come from the Fremont's cornfield, naturally. Everybody knew what was out there, and the field was going to weeds. Then they polished off the dessert, homemade ice cream and cookies. And then they sat back, in the flickering light of the candles, and chatted, waiting for television. There never was a lot of mumbling on television night. Everybody came and had a good dinner at the Fremonts, and that was nice. And afterwards there was television, and nobody really thought much about that. It just had to be put up with. So it was a pleasant enough get-together, aside from your having to watch what you said just as carefully as you always did every place. If a dangerous thought came into your mind, you just started mumbling, even right in the middle of a sentence. When you did that, the others just ignored you until you felt happier again and stopped. Anthony liked television night. He had done only 2 or 3 awful things on television night in the whole past year. Mom had put a bottle of brandy on the table, and they each had a tiny glass of it. Liquor was even more precious than tobacco. The villagers could make wine, but the grapes weren't right, and certainly the techniques weren't, and it wasn't very good wine. There were only a few bottles of real liquor left in the village. 4 rye, 3 scotch, 3 brandy, 9 real wine, and half a bottle of drambuie belonging to old McIntyre, only for marriages. And when those were gone, that was it. Afterward, everybody wished that the brandy hadn't been brought out, because Dan Hollis drank more of it than he should have, and mixed it with a lot of the homemade wine. Nobody thought anything about it at first, because he didn't show it much outside. And it was his birthday party and a happy party, and Anthony liked these get-togethers and shouldn't see any reason to do anything, even if he was listening. But Dan Hollis got high and did a fool thing. If they'd seen it coming, they'd have taken him outside and walked him around. The first thing they knew, Dan stopped laughing right in the middle of the story about how Thelma Dunn had found the Perry Como record and dropped it, and it hadn't broken because she'd moved faster than she had ever before in her life and caught it. He was fondling the record again and looking longingly at the Fremont's gramophone over in the corner. And suddenly he stopped laughing and his face got slack. And then it got ugly. And he said, "Oh, Christ!" Immediately the room was still. So still they could hear the weary movement of the grandfather's clock out in the hall. Pat Riley had been playing the piano softly. He stopped, his hands poised over the yellowed keys. The candles on the dining room table flickered in a cool breeze that blew through the lace curtains over the bay window. "Keep playing, Pat," Anthony's father said softly. Pat started again. He played night and day, but his eyes were sidewise on Dan Hollis, and he missed notes. Dan stood in the middle of the room, holding the record. In his other hand, he held a glass of brandy so hard his hand shook. They were all looking at him. "Christ," he said again, and he made it sound like a dirty word. Reverend Younger, who had been talking with Mom and Aunt Amy by the dining room door, said "Christ" too, but he was using it in a prayer. His hands were clasped, and his eyes were closed. John Sipich moved forward. "Now, Dan, it's good for you to talk that way, but you don't want to talk too much, you know." Dan shook off the hand Sipich put on his arm. "Can't even play my record," he said loudly. He looked down at the record and then around at their faces. "Oh, my God." He threw the glassful of brandy against the wall. It splattered and ran down the wallpaper in streaks. Some of the women gasped. "Dan," Sipich said in a whisper. "Dan, cut it out." Pat Riley was playing night and day louder to cover up the sounds of the talk. It wouldn't do any good, though, if Anthony was listening. Then Hollis went over to the piano and stood by Pat's shoulder, swaying a little. "Pat," he said, "don't play that. Play this." And he began to sing. Softly, hoarsely, miserably. "Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me." "Then!" Ethel Hollis screamed. She tried to run across the room to him. Mary Sippich grabbed her arm and held her back. "Then," Ethel screamed again, "stop!" "My God, be quiet!" hissed Mary Sippich, and pushed her toward one of the men, who put his hand over her mouth and held her still. "Happy birthday, dear Danny," Dan sang. "Happy birthday to me." He stopped and looked down at Pat Riley. "Play it, Pat. Play it so I can sing, right? You know I can't carry a tune unless somebody plays it." Pat Riley put his hands on the keys and began Lover in a low waltzo tempo, the way Anthony liked it. Pat's face was white. His hands fumbled. Then Holly stared over at the dining room door, at Anthony's mother and at Anthony's father, who had gone to join her. "You had him," he said. Tears gleamed on his cheek as the candlelight caught them. "You had to go and have him." He closed his eyes, and the tears squeezed out. He sang loudly, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when I am blue." Anthony came into the room. Pat stopped playing. He froze. Everybody froze. The breeze rippled the curtains. Ethel Hollis couldn't even try to scream. She had fainted. "Please don't take my sunshine away." Dan's voice faltered into silence. His eyes widened. He put both hands out in front of him, the empty glass in one, the record in the other. He hiccuped and said, "No." "Bad man," Anthony said, and thought Dan Hollis into something like nothing anyone would have believed possible. And then he thought the thing into a grave deep, deep in the cornfield. The glass and record thumped on the rug. Neither broke. Anthony's purple gaze went around the room. Some of the people began mumbling. They all tried to smile. The sound of mumbling filled the room like a far-off approval. Out of the murmuring came one or two clear voices. "Oh, it's a very good thing," said John Sippich. "A good thing," said Anthony's father, smiling. He had more practice in smiling than most of them. "A wonderful thing." "It's swell, just swell," said Pat Riley, tears leaking from eyes and nose, and he began to play the piano again softly, in his trembling hands feeling for night and day. Anthony climbed up on top of the piano, and Pat played for 2 hours. End of part 5.